good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the IFA's Global Café. My name is Katrina Mazanis. I'm the Director of Policy Advocacy and Innovation here at the IFA, and very pleased to welcome you all to this session. So as some of you may or may not be aware, May is Vision Health Month here in Canada, which is an opportunity to raise awareness of various eye conditions, the importance of vision care, and the need for access to innovative therapies to ensure protection of function and quality of life. So vision is innately intertwined with healthy aging. And as aging brings about changes in vision, proactive eye care becomes increasingly crucial for maintaining independence, safety, and overall well-being. However, many older people and those at risk of vision loss face barriers to accessing adequate care, leading to untreated vision problems that can significantly impact daily life. And joining us today to discuss this topic is Ms. Jennifer Jones and Dr. Larissa Moniz from Fighting Blindness Canada. So Jennifer joined Fighting Blindness Canada as the president and CEO in 2023. And prior to FBC, Jennifer devoted over 20 years to social impact, advocacy, and fundraising across the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. And Jennifer is known for scaling and transforming organizations, including the Indigo Love of Reading Foundation and Toronto Public Library Foundation, where she delivered more than $50 million through traditional fundraising and contemporary cause marketing models to educational programming, community spaces, and poverty reduction. Larissa, who's also joining us, joined Fighting Blindness Canada in December of 2019. She has a PhD in molecular biology from the University of Toronto and has continued her research in the UK at the University of College London. Larissa has worked in research and knowledge translation at a number of health charities, both in the UK and Canada. At Fighting Blindness Canada, Larissa's team works to deliver on the mission of the organization, which is to fund research towards treatments to preserve and restore vision, ensure that all Canadians have access to appropriate vision care, and to provide support and information to individuals living with vision loss. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being with us today at today's Global Cafe. We always start the Global Cafe, getting into a little bit of your background and your story. So, I'll start with you, Jennifer. I want to ask, can you tell us a little bit about your story and what led you to now working with Fighting Blindness Canada?
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. And hello, everybody. I love the good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Like some of you, Larissa and I are enjoying a little coffee because it's early in Canada where we are. I think my bio, I didn't fully appreciate how international this audience would be. We've got 16 countries in addition to Canada. So I want to acknowledge the organizations that my bio spoke to probably didn't mean a lot to people. And what I'll share is that one of them was Canada's biggest book retailer, and the other one was the world's biggest library, both best-in-class organizations. And it's important for me to share that because that is the caliber of organization that I'm attracted to. And joining Fighting Blindness Canada was an extension of that commitment to excellence. I had an uncle, my mother's younger brother, was born deaf and went blind over his lifetime. He had Usher syndrome. And so blindness and vision loss is a cause very close to my family and to me. And so when Fighting Blindness Canada was looking for its new leader to help it recognize the 50 years it's been in Canada and very successfully doing its work, but looking to how would it really scale up, grow, and become even more ambitious over the next 50 years, it felt like a really good fit for what I'd love to do, as well as the values that I love to be able to bring to work every day.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That's amazing to hear, and an amazing kind of journey through other pieces of work that you've had. Would love if there's any lessons that you've learned as well from those previous organizations. I hope that can come through in the conversation as well. So Larissa, I'd like to also give you the opportunity to share kind of what has led you to Fighting Blindness Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my bio probably is a little bit more straightforward than Jennifer's in terms of arriving where I am. So I've taken sort of the academic route with doing research. I was a molecular biologist, so really trying to understand how different molecules interact and talk to each other in the cell and how that leads to different cell outcomes. But I was most focused on the cancer space. And then once I left my academic career, I moved to the not-for-profit sector. And the reason was I really enjoyed communicating about science, and I thought that was a good opportunity to take some of the skills I'd learned and also to continue to talking to individuals about things that were important to them. And in this case, it would be about different types of diseases. The opportunity came up to join Fighting Blindness Canada, and what I really enjoyed or attracted me to this organization, because my background had been so much within the cancer sphere, was it really felt like there was a big untapped need in the vision loss space. I think it's an area that many people don't consider how important it is and how big an impact it can have. And I know I learned a lot after joining the organization as well, but it felt like I would really be contributing to an untapped need. And at the same time, there was a really exciting opportunities in the research and sort of burgeoning treatment landscape, which was also very exciting, especially in, for instance, the inherited retinal disease space. So yeah, so that's why I'm here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. So I'm wondering if we can kind of set the scene a little bit, and if Jennifer, you can maybe start off by sharing just a little bit of what Fighting Blindness Canada is. Obviously, we have a very international audience that may not be familiar.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, would you like to kind of share a little bit about, what it is that you do and you work on?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say to the audience that Larissa and I are here very much as co-presenters. So we're going to tag team each other. Larissa, no surprise, has all the science and expertise. So she'll answer the more technical questions, and I'll take more of the strategic overview questions. And often we'll share the answers. So to answer what Fighting Blindness Canada does is, first of all, we've been around for 50 years. And we have been the longest, or we are the biggest funder of vision research, charitable funder of vision research in Canada. And that's something we're really celebrating this year. Our purpose, or the reason we get out of bed every day, is to make sure that people, in particular Canadians, facing the loss of vision because of blinding eye diseases, know that they have the support of the work that we're doing. And that means we are investing in best-in-class research. That might be within Canada, but it also could be with international partners. And then we bring the learning from the science to our community, because of course, if you're losing your sight, you really want to understand what is being done to find treatments and cures. And so we want to make sure that we communicate that back to our community as best in real time as we can. And it's also an opportunity for us to help people create connections so that they can share their common experiences with each other, because it's a rather fearful and anxiety-filled experience, and you want to know that you're connecting with people who understand what you're going through. And lastly, we work with a lot of the other vision organizations in Canada to advocate for equitable access to eye health treatment in Canada. And we do that at a federal level, but in Canada, we have 13 provinces, which means each province has its own regulations of how it delivers healthcare. So it can become a little bit complicated, but we want to make sure essentially that every Canadian has access to the healthcare support that they need to address the concerns that they're facing. Mm-hmm. Larissa, would you add anything else to that?
I wouldn't actually. I thought that was a really great overview of the work we do. And essentially, as Jennifer mentioned, in the 3 categories: funding research, providing information and education, and advocacy.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for that overview. I'm wondering, to kind of set the scene a little bit more for our audience. Can you, speak a little bit about what kind of the intersection is with vision loss, aging? The relationship between vision and healthy aging is something that we talk about a lot here at IFA. So Larissa, maybe I'll pass that question to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with a couple of stats. So one of them is that 8 million Canadians estimated in Canada have an eye disease that puts them at risk of vision loss. And the other one is that 1.2 million Canadians have vision loss. And if you break down the numbers, the majority of the vision loss or the risk of vision loss is caused by age-related vision loss. So this is cataracts, age-related macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy and macular edema, although I know they can impact individuals who are younger, but the biggest impact is on individuals as they age, and glaucoma. And that doesn't even include the other eye diseases or issues such as dry eye disease or other refractive issues. So there can be a really huge impact of age-related vision loss on individuals, but also on their families and on society. So for instance, for an individual, it can lead to the loss of their ability to do daily tasks or hobbies, things that they love to do, things such as cooking or reading or watching TV. For many people, one of the really big, I would say, trigger points is when they can't drive anymore. And that is something that a lot of individuals really fear, and they tell us about it, that they get really nervous that maybe their doctor will tell them they won't be able to drive anymore, which can really curtail their independence and the way they have set up their lives. And because of all of this, it can also lead to a lot of isolation if they are less able to go out and do things by themselves or meet their friends or socialize. And the way we've set up our world, vision can be very integral to how we navigate the world. So it can have a really huge impact as individuals, as they age, start to lose their sight. I would say there are two things just to sort of highlight the impact, and the impact is really, really wide ranging, but I want to highlight two things. One is the impact the vision loss has on falls and fractures, and the other one is a potential link with dementia. And these are just two examples of the impact that vision loss can have. So the risks of falls and fractures is much higher in older adults who have vision loss than at older adults who don't have vision loss. A recent paper was putting the risk at 20 to 30% higher for a higher risk of falls and fractures for individuals who had eye diseases like AMD, cataracts, or glaucoma. And with some work we've done with the Canadian Council of the Blind, some of this vision loss is linked to even more serious outcomes like death. So it's estimated that about 1,200 individuals die every year, and this is often due to things like falls or isolation. Falls can also lead to hospitalizations, visits to the emergency room. So obviously a cost to the healthcare system, but also a cost to the individual, as it can also lead to a higher chance of having to move to a nursing home. And the second thing is a sort of growing association between dementia and vision loss. And I don't think the science is exactly clear right now as how that association works, but there seems to be sort of a two-way association. One, that dementia can cause problems processing visual information, even if your eyes are healthy. It can lead to sort of the inability to process visual information and vision problems. But there's also data that vision loss may also be linked to increased risk of dementia, especially if joined with other comorbidities such as cardiovascular disease or diabetes. So a really sort of profound impact, and for us, but also for individuals, but also for sort of the broader society, as we are trying to make aging as comfortable as possible and as fulfilling as possible for individuals as they age.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much, Larissa, for that overview. And I appreciate that you've added kind of, the falls, the sensory, the cognition aspect of it, because I think, there really is a lot of interrelationships in terms of, the different, how vision can affect function and how it can affect quality of life. And so I think that those are some really important things to highlight. Jennifer, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to add anything if you had it.
This is definitely Larissa's expertise, so I will say brilliantly well done.
Great.
And I'll also call out that I joined a year ago this month, actually. So, and my background is more literacy and education. So I've been using the last year to really learn a lot about the sector and the different organizations, but also the science. And Larissa has been a great tutor for me to get up to speed. But I really do recognize her expertise in this, and I think it was really well said, and really highlighting the challenge that we face as in, Fighting Blindness Canada. There's a lot of overlap with other organizations who also serve people with the vision community. So a big part of what we're doing is also working with or identifying partners or partnerships that we should be playing in to make sure that there's a cross-pollination of everyone's expertise. So the individual who is challenged with perhaps more than one issue is getting the dual support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And I will add, it's a great complement of skill sets that you both have for, you know, a little bit more of a kind of strategic in this, and then getting into the science. So, so Larissa, I want to follow up on some of the points that you mentioned, which is obviously, you know, Fighting Blindness Canada, you know, primarily focuses on the funding of research. So, you know, what research is needed to kind of support some of the areas that you've identified for older people, and as it has to do with aging?
Absolutely. So I think in Canada, this is something we've talked about quite a lot between our organization, but also in the general vision research sphere, is there never seems to be enough funding for specifically vision research. So for instance, there's no dedicated funding stream in Canada that is just for eye health, where in the States, they have a whole institute called the National Eye Institute, which is part of their overall funding body, which is the National Institutes of Health. Our biggest government funding body for health research is Canadian Institute of Health Research. There are a number of different institutes. Eye health is sort of jammed in with, I think, the Neuroscience and Mental Health Institute, and it really doesn't have a priority at this moment in time, which we are working with the other vision loss organizations as part of the national strategy for eye care to try to encourage the government to make vision health more of a priority. And I think the importance of science, and I don't think anybody on this call probably needs this encouragement, but obviously we all know that we won't have better outcomes without more research. So there's a stat that 3 out of 4 cases of vision loss can be prevented or treated if it is caught early. And I think that's only possible because of an investment in research. And of course, we want to get to the point where it's 4 out of 4 cases of vision loss could be prevented or treated. But even still, 75% is a very high number, but we are there because of decades of investment in research, and we really need to keep investing to improve treatments, improve quality of life, and improve sort of investment across the whole spectrum of vision research.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for providing that answer. So I do, you know, you touched on it a little bit, but I'm wondering if you can maybe dive a little bit more specifically into, you know, what policy is needed, and what sort of government efforts are needed to really support that cause.
So I think in Canada, we have a slightly complex healthcare system where we have the federal government, which does provide funding to the individual provinces for healthcare, but it's the provinces themselves that really set the agenda for healthcare. So I think, one, you can talk about research. Of course, it would be great to have more research funding overall. I think that is largely a federal government choice. But in terms of how healthcare is delivered, and so much of good outcomes is from the healthcare itself and the support services around treatments as well, such as vision rehab, all those things are provincially funded. So we really need to have a conversation that is bringing in all the players. So it's quite a complex conversation. So we are working as within the vision loss sphere together on this, because we know that one organization alone really can't do it. So we're working with the optometrists, the ophthalmologists, CNIB, which is one of the largest, probably the largest vision loss charity in Canada, Canadian Council of the Blind, and it sort of goes on and on. Any organization that supports individuals who have vision loss or eye disease. And we're really pushing for a national eye care strategy. I think this is one of the most important policy initiatives. And the strategy itself, if it is currently sitting in one of the houses of government right now, waiting for approval. If it is approved, what it will do is will tell the government that they have to create a national eye care strategy, and it gives them a year to do this. And we are looking to have a number of items included in this, which is a vision desk at the Public Health Agency of Canada, more research funding, a more consistent supply of medication, and enhanced care for certain priority populations, and of course, increased awareness around eye health. And that will really give us the framework then to try to implement change after the strategy is complete.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you so much. Jennifer, did you want to add anything to that?
I think I would only add that, you know, it is pretty, I think, especially as I'm new to this sector, pretty shocking that Canada hasn't had a national eye care strategy and it's 2024. And a lot of people would ask, well, what does that really mean? Like, how's that going to benefit me in a practical way? And what I would say is that would give us the opportunity to really have a platform to get our message out as a collective, right? Not just Fighting Blindness Canada, but as Larissa said, all the vision organizations who are really fighting for space to get their message out. And that would be both around prevention, like eye health care, so that there's a preventative approach to it, but also ensuring that there's more money flowing into the research side of things. So accelerating the opportunity to find treatments and cures. And it would mean that we'd be able to get to new parents when they have a baby who are then educated on the importance of eye health care, and that they should be taking their children to the eye doctor, you know, every 2 years, for example. That message doesn't happen right now. It would also mean that we'd be probably integrated into the educational system. So teachers would be responsible for delivering a curriculum to explain to children why eye health care is so important. And the combination of the family and the education happening in parallel would hopefully reinforce that message. And then there would be ideally more equitable access to eye health care as well. And so it would be a multi-tiered approach that would change hopefully the landscape of vision health in Canada over decades. Of course, this isn't going to happen overnight, but more importantly, it would really give us an opportunity to get ahead of the work that we're trying to do right now, and I think light a fire in a way that it would add to the gravitas of what we're trying to communicate to people now, and it would give us access to a broader audience. So it's an exciting moment in time right now to be in Canada, knowing that the national eye care strategy is, as Larissa said, it's at the last step, and there's a real linking arms together with other vision organizations to try and get it over that finish line. And if we can do that, we'll be in a much better place, 10 years down the road. And ultimately, that's all why we're all in this business, is to increase the quality of life for all Canadians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. And, I think I do have a couple kind of questions about the person, at the center of all of this. So I appreciate you kind of explaining what does this mean for, the average kind of Canadian. Mm-hmm. But before I go to that, I want to go to the chat and mm-hmm. have a question from the chat. So Walter Whittick has put a question in. Walter, do you want to come forward and pose your question?
Good morning and hi from Montreal.
Oh, bonjour,
hi, Walter.
Good to see you guys. I was just hanging out with Larissa last week.
Yeah.
So Larissa and I have had extensive conversations about this because when you speak of treatment and cure, of course, to me, the third piece is missing, which is rehabilitation, the thing that can make a difference today, not 25 years from now. And so I'm curious whether it is included in the considerations for the strategy that you're talking about.
It is a really good question and a very timely question, Walter. We're working on our next 5-year strategic plan. And so we are looking at the landscape of where Fighting Blindness Canada is now, and what are the needs of the community, and could we do a better job of serving those needs? What I will say, though, is there is a really formidable organization across Canada called Vision Loss Rehab Center. And they have a great reputation for doing, I think, probably very much what you are asking about. We are in talks with them about how do we better support the work that we do, because together I think we're both sides of the coin in some ways. But because of, I think there are about 30,000 people, and they have offices in towns and cities across Canada. Right now, we're 20 people in Toronto. And so they're really set up to deliver the expertise that you're talking about. And I think our responsibility is to make sure that our community knows about vision loss rehab centers. So if we get a question from someone who is looking for that type of support, we would then introduce them to that organization. And hopefully that organization, if people are really interested in the science of what they're dealing with every day and are looking for a community, would introduce them back to us. So that kind of cross-pollination is really important. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think my concern is more about research funding, because VLR, like Vision Loss Rehab Canada, really provides services. They don't really fund research as such, whereas you do. But you actually,
Yes.
as far as I know, that has never happened. And this is what Larissa and I have been discussing. I think given the development of this strategy, it will be exciting to figure out if we can include rehabilitation in that mandate. It's
an interesting idea, actually. And like I said, timely. So we haven't tabled that directly yet with the management team or the board. We're early in the process. So I think it's great that you've asked the question now, and certainly Larissa and I can take it back and bring it to the team and add it, throw it up on the wall along with everything else that we're considering. And, I think my last message to that is we are a small but mighty team, and want to make sure that if we're going to commit to something, we have the capacity to be able to do it really, really well. So I think stay tuned is the answer to that, but appreciate that you're recognizing there's a spectrum of need, and research is the long game. And I appreciate, like, rehab is today, right? And that's a really important part of why we have the community engagement and education sessions. So I'm gonna take that one and noodle it over the long weekend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Larissa, did you want to add anything to that response?
Yeah, I would sort of echo Jennifer's comment about small team, and what if we're going to be investing in research, we want to make sure that we're really investing meaningfully. And so where can we really have the biggest impact? I do think that vision rehab is part of our mandate. You're right, Walter. We haven't yet funded anybody directly within the vision rehab space. We've had a few applications, and some of whom scored quite highly, absolutely. But we have had quite limited funding over the past few years in general. And so then there's always things that fall in and fall out. But I do think that if we are going to be offering and saying that we're offering across the spectrum, we have to be a bit more thoughtful about how we reach out to researchers who are doing this work, and making sure that we do have perhaps dedicated funding for different areas of research, whether it is we often have different funding pools for, like, say, front of the eye versus back of the eye. So maybe this is another pool we have to consider. As a second part to the strategy, I will be developing a research strategy. And again, that will go through community consultation with researchers. So very timely question. I've heard it twice now in a week now, Walter. You've been very good about this. So I will, it will definitely be percolating in my head as well.
But listen, that's what we need. As Larissa said, we take our relationship or our commitment to our community very seriously. So when they bring us their challenges and they look at us to help solve for it, we really take it back and be like, how do we do this? And then we'll be very honest if it's something we can't commit to now, but understanding the challenge and the opportunity now is important, so we can introduce it when the organization is ready to do it well. Because what we don't want to do is disappoint people.
Yeah. So we just to kind of go back to, there is another question in the chat, just to maybe kind of take a couple of steps back, just asking, what is exactly is meant by visual rehabilitation? So maybe we can kind of walk it back a little bit. Larissa, I don't know if you want to take this, or Walter, happy for you to add something.
I would actually call on Walter to take
in
this space. So
thank you so much, Walter, for your being thrown in. So
sure. So to explain who I am, I'm the director of the Vision Rehabilitation Training Program at the University of Montreal, in Canada. And we train 3 types of professionals Low vision therapists are people that work in sight enhancement. So they will work with clients who have partial vision to maximize the vision that remains. We have vision rehabilitation therapists that work in sight substitution. They work mostly with people who are functionally blind or completely blind and use hearing, tactile techniques, text-to-speech, that kind of technology in order to facilitate the ability to conduct otherwise vision-based tasks. And the third professionals are orientation and mobility specialists, which across the vision spectrum teach people independent travel, cane techniques. They work in training and integrating guide dogs into people's lives, depending on their needs and their preferences. So vision rehabilitation basically is something that ideally works in parallel across the spectrum to optometry and ophthalmology to facilitate visual functioning even while treatments are going on, or especially after treatment options have run out, because we're basically working with what we have instead of waiting until we may or may not know later on. So it's the intervention of today for planning for tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Walter, for providing a little bit more of an explanation on that. So there are a few questions in the chat, but Walter is actually prompting me to ask another question, which is, do you see kind of any relationship or any opportunity to connect between other ongoing agendas in Canada? Because as we know, there's a dementia care strategy in Canada. There's lots of opportunities, even, across, this connection and thinking of, sensory as a whole. I even think about age-friendly, strategy frameworks in Canada. Do you see opportunities, to actually, cross and connect these agendas that are, so interrelated, but we talk about them often separately?
Larissa, do you want me to jump in first, and then
Yes,
you can
go ahead?
My answer to that, Katrina, is 100%.
Mm-hmm.
We are too small to achieve our ambitious goals alone. It's really going to be very important for us to find partnerships who can help us accelerate the work that we're doing by providing us access to their audience who may be facing diabetes, for example, but have a segment of people who have diabetic retinopathy.
Mm-hmm.
How about Alzheimer's? As Larissa said at the beginning, there are people with Alzheimer's and that becomes a greater issue when you're dealing with vision loss. So I think there are a number of organizations that are well suited to become very important partners for us as we really want to amplify our message. There's also a new strategy around rare diseases, right? Like, how do we take advantage of that? So, and there's amazing organizations, like in Canada, people would know the Rick Hansen Foundation, who's doing incredible work around accessibility. Recently, I was speaking with their president and saying, like, there's overlap in a lot of different places. How do we very thoughtfully start to partner with those organizations to make sure that their community know about Fighting Blindness Canada? And we are co-promoting the work that we're doing. So we're not keeping people in silos, but we're making sure that they really have access to all the resources through those different relationships.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much. So I do want to go back to a couple more questions in the chat. So we do have a question from Shmuel, who is a weekly contributor at the IFA's Global Café. And he's asking, what is kind of the role of governments and different authorities in improving access for kind of low and socioeconomic groups to vision health and effective care for vision loss?
Yeah. That's a complicated one, Shmuel, but thank you for the question. I want to go back to, I'll take the first tip at this, but I think Larissa has been much more deeply involved in advocacy over her time with Fighting Blindness Canada, so probably has a little bit more to share. I think going back to the National Eye Care Strategy, that would be a great platform for us to be able to ensure that, again, there's equitable access to the eye care support that you need. There's also organizations who are already doing this in small ways. Canada Council for the Blind is, I think, an example of one of them, where I believe they have like a mobile bus that goes into communities. And so I think what you're helping us identify is that there is recognition of the more vulnerable communities, and providing access to them will be very important. But beyond that, I don't have a lot more detail at this point. And because we don't deliver programming or treatments to those audiences now, we're just not set up to do it. You know, I don't have my fingers in those pies just yet, but are very cognizant of the fact that as a Canadian organization, we have a responsibility to make sure that the work we do does reach everybody, regardless of where they live in our country. Larissa, would you want to add to that?
Yeah, so like starting off, as you mentioned, if within the National Eye Care Strategy, one of the sort of core pillars that we are advocating for is enhanced care for priority populations. That includes Indigenous populations, but other priority populations who don't have access. So for instance, we're currently funding a research project at the University Health Network in Toronto, which is called Project Open, which is trying to enhance screening for diabetic retinopathy in the province that I live in, which is called Ontario. If you have diabetes, you are eligible for free eye screening every, I believe it's 2 years. And when this research group, when they looked to see where the eye screening was or wasn't taking place, perhaps surprisingly, some of the areas of greatest need were actually in urban centers. It wasn't necessarily in the, I think they probably had expected it would be more in the rural and remote areas where it is hard to have access. You don't have regular healthcare professionals there, but actually it was some of these urban areas. And often a lot of those individuals are English as a second language, maybe different socioeconomic status. And so they're really doing a project that is trying to understand how can you increase access for specific populations who technically have access to treatment. It's sort of within an area for them to go to. It's available, but in reality, they don't have access. And so I think that's why the conversation is really complicated, because access means so many different things, and it really needs many people working on it. But I think having something like a national eye care strategy, which is saying this is a priority as a whole, will help. But the solutions to it will be really different, whether you're talking about access for someone who doesn't speak English as a first language versus someone who has access issues because they're in a rural area versus, you know, they have access issues because they have comorbidities or there is no primary care physician. So yeah, very complicated question, especially for a country, I would say, as big as Canada, with very many sort of diverse populations within it.
Mm-hmm. Larissa, I wonder if you can maybe even just take a step back, you know, briefly, and just speak about, you know, these types of populations that you're talking about. I wonder if you can speak to, you know, just how complicated it is, you know, the pathway is to actually kind of receiving that care. Because I think that's something that maybe the audience may not be aware of, is how, you know, there's diagnosis, there's treatment, there's, you know, oftentimes with some of these diseases, treatment is very frequent and very intense. You know, so I wonder if you can, you know, put kind of your response into context a little bit. Absolutely.
So yeah, all those things are very true. So there are a few different stages. First of all, there's the diagnosis stage. I think somebody just popped into the chat about in Ontario, if you're over the age of 65, eye screening or regular eye care appointments are covered by the provincial government or by healthcare. If you're under 65, they actually aren't. So if you've got health insurance through work, good for you. If you don't actually have access to regular eye care. So there is one huge challenge right there, is getting individuals in for regular eye care appointments. So, which really is the best way to catch a potential problem earlier and then, you know, move on to treatment. The second is, once you are diagnosed, what does treatment look like? For some types of eye diseases, for instance, if you're at the early stage of glaucoma, this is a little bit more straightforward. It's eye drops that you can take at home. Of course, there are challenges there, but that's a bit more straightforward. However, for one of the largest causes of vision loss for older people, that's age-related macular degeneration, largely caused by what's called wet or neovascular AMD. And that requires, if you have wet AMD, you require regular eye injections of medicine into your eye. And that obviously has to be done at a sort of specialized clinic with retinal specialists. And you are taking those injections between every month or up to maybe every 3 to 4 months if you can get on a treatment and your condition is stable, but really frequent treatments. And so, of course, for many people, this is a problem to get to, even sort of within, you can imagine with everybody's lives, if you're like working age, having regular appointments, if you often need to have somebody come with you to the appointments because once you get the injection, you can't drive anymore right away and things like that. If you're traveling long distances, that's a huge burden. And of course, if you are in a really rural area, you will possibly even have to fly out to get those injections. So the complications, depending on who you are, where you live, can be different, but they're all quite burdensome on the patient. And that's just one sort of eye disease that I'm talking about. So I think that does give a bit of that sort of context about the complexity that might be there, even when there are treatments available.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I think that's something, this is, also areas where we kind of need that attention is, what is the burden on the individual, on their supporters, on their family, and things like that. So I appreciate you kind of giving a little bit of that context. Okay, so I do want to go back to the chat, which is, very active today. So we do have a question from Indu. Indu, thank you so much for kind of waiting patiently. Would you like to unmute and pose your question?
My question is, a lot of older people, when become lonely, spend a lot of their time on TV screens or iPads now and everything. And is there any research being done that the impact of this lifestyle on the deterioration of vision in this group? Because when I see people, they're just sitting very close to the TV screen. And as you said, many of them don't have access to regular eye checkups. Is anybody doing this research to educate people about vision loss in these situations?
Larissa, do you want to tackle that maybe?
Yes, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Indu, I think there's a couple of sort of questions or thoughts in there. The first is the first around the impact that screens are having on vision health, or was it more about the awareness factor?
I think it is the most about the awareness factors to the patient as well as person, as well as the families, because when they set up their rooms, they set up the things, it's like that. And I see many of the people who gradually are losing vision. And it's hard to tell them because there is no data or anything you can say to bring it to their attention.
So right now, as far as I know, and if anybody in the audience has different information, please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's any very clear data about necessarily for adults, for older adults, screen time and vision loss. I know there's some data around children and screen time, and it's often correlated with not doing other activities like going outside and playing. That can have an impact, especially for myopia. But I think for older adults, there isn't a clear link between that. From a personal point of view, I feel like when I look at screens a lot, I do get more sort of dry eyes and sort of tired eyes, but that's a slightly probably different issue than some of these big age-related causes of vision loss. But I do think in general, when we're thinking about sort of healthy living and healthy aging, there are things that sort of are universal, I think, across the health spectrum, and that is being active, eating well, probably getting enough sleep. There's a few things at play there where I think it doesn't necessarily, by eating healthy, you're not going to necessarily have a lower risk of glaucoma, but by having a healthy lifestyle, I think all of these things are so interconnected that is really important, and activity is really important for general health. In terms of awareness, I think awareness is such a complicated thing to achieve. I've seen this across like many different disease areas where we do try to raise awareness about vision loss, both through our own campaigns, as well as working with other organizations, whether it's, you know, it's Vision Health Month this month. So we are promoting a lot of different messaging, trying to talk about healthy eyes. How you sort of cut through all the messages out there about so many different things, I think it's really, really hard. I think you do need to have a concerted effort, ideally at a provincial or federal level, so those messages are getting as broadly as possible. I think what would be, to me, ideal is having a more organized eye health screening, the same way you have it for some other areas, for instance, for sort of the HPV screening or the mammography once you reach a certain age for women. I think if there was something that was a little bit more directed by the provincial government, so you're getting a letter in the mail saying, you know, it's been two years since you had your last eye appointment, please contact your eye doctor. I think things like that can help, but we know that even those things alone aren't good enough. So you sort of really need a really multifaceted approach that's starting probably from not only the primary care, but even community leaders, sort of all of us talking with the same message. Jennifer, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I thought that was brilliant. I will say I have a couple friends who are in the elder space. And so they're very focused on national senior strategy in Canada and the requirement of that and what that would look like. And I think one of the challenges that we face, certainly in Canada, and I don't think we're unique, is making seniors a priority and investing in the research and the programming to support that aging audience. It's a challenge for a lot of the work that we do in Canada, for sure. And now we're talking about the combination of aging and eye care already is underdeveloped or undersupported. So I think it's a challenging space, but recognize the need for sure. And goes back to, I think, what Katrina asked around where are there potential partnerships for us. And so working with organizations who specifically support aging Canadians is probably another area that we should be looking at too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks so much, Jennifer and Larissa. So I'm gonna go to another question in the chat from Sylvie Castonguay, who's another great partner as well. Sylvie, did you want to unmute and pose your question?
Yes, thank you. I'm pleased to be part of this chat this morning. I just stepped down, in fact, as an executive director at the Quebec Macular Degeneration Association, but I'm still there for a few weeks, and I'm supporting our new executive director, Pascal Pro. I have a specific question about for Jennifer about what you said regarding your strategic planning, which is a very good thing to be planning. I'm pleased to hear that, and you do a great job at FBC. I wanted to know in your planning and vision, what is your what are you planning or envisioning about the work with the province of Quebec's specific eye care ecosystem, as we know that we have a specific rehabilitation. Our services are from the Ministry of Health, and we speak French mostly. And I agree with you that we have to work all together. And I'm pleased to see that the Canadian government should be voting for a national eye care policy. So I would like to hear you more about how we can work together, and what's your vision of Quebec and
how to do that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Bonjour,
right.
Sylvie, and thank you for your question. It's a conversation we have actually fairly often with my team. And the short answer is we would love to work with Quebec. Like as a Canadian organization, it's important that we have relationships in every province and major markets across Canada. The reality is, though, we don't have the capacity to support French in a consistent and quality way that I think would be very important. Quebec is, I mean, for anyone else on it who is not familiar with Canadian politics, Quebec is an exceptionally unique province in Canada. It has deep, deep, rich roots in the French culture, and there's a lot of policy work and certainly social will to really invest in that culture. And so Quebec is not entered into lightly. It has to be stepped into very thoughtfully, strategically, and with a real commitment to be able to deliver programming and work in the French language. And we just don't have capacity to do that well now. And the last thing I would want to do is try and not respect the culture and the language in a way that it deserves. I think we would burn bridges very quickly. And I'm actually from Montreal originally, and so I take this to heart. But with that said, we do have relationships in Quebec right now. For those that we can work very seamlessly with, we do have relationships. In fact, one of our board members is a well-respected clinical scientist researcher named Michel Caillouette. He's a great voice for us and a great champion both within Quebec and across Canada. And so, Larissa, I will hand this off to her, who can speak with a little more detail about the relationships that we currently have. But I think that was a very long way of saying not yet, Sylvie, okay. But certainly it is. We have an eye to Quebec and an idea of how we want to do it. What we have to do is be able to have the right staff is really what it is, to be able to do that consistently and with the quality that we think is necessary.
Thank you.
No, merci beaucoup.
Larissa, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I can just add sort of briefly. I just agree with everything that Jennifer said. It's always one of those, I would say, pain points where we want to be in Quebec, we want to serve the population, but we also realize, for instance, I don't speak French. And so there end up being some challenges with trying to have a fulsome program and not just trying to pretend that we have this like French presence when we really don't. I know we have been working with AQDM, Sylvie, and I'm happy to see Pascal on the call. We'll definitely have to connect after this as well. But I think that's, as a starting point, is a really important way of helping to support what is happening in Quebec and elevate it where possible. So for instance, we do try to put in submissions into INES either alone or in collaboration with organizations like AQDM if they exist in the Quebec provinces. And for INES is a healthcare regulator which approves drugs in Quebec. So I would say we're doing baby steps and hoping to do more. Absolutely.
Thank you both. So we are just in kind of the final minutes of the session. So I'm going to take just a minute or so to introduce our speaker for next week. And then I'll come back to you both for your kind of final key takeaway messages. So next week, we're very happy to welcome Dr. Prakash Tyagi, who's a director at the IFA, to our Global Café, and he's going to be speaking on climate change and its impact on the aging population. So I think that's, an incredibly pressing issue, which will be a great conversation next week. So I hope that you all will join us for that. All right, so now I'll go back to Jennifer and Larissa just for your final takeaway messages. And, it is, as we mentioned off the top, it is kind of Vision Health Month here in Canada. So maybe kind of what kind of, in the context of, this kind of advocacy and awareness month, what are your final takeaway messages from from today's session? Jennifer, I can start with you.
Thank you. Listen, I'm really honored that everybody took the time to join us today. Certainly in Canada, it is all about, take care, take the time if you have access to a doctor. This goes back to equitable, access to eye health care, but, take the time, see the doctor, make sure that you are investing in your total health. Right? It is a holistic view. If you ever have any questions, Fighting Blindness Canada has a fantastic website with a lot of support information available on it. I know that there's going to be links provided to you so that you can find access to the work that we do. If you ever have any questions, please email me directly. And, we look forward to maybe building a relationship with a lot of you over time. Certainly we're in the midst of launching a new fundraising event for Canadians. It's an inclusive event for people who want to get involved, show their support by helping us fundraise so that we can invest in even more research and programming to support Canadians.
Thank you so much. Larissa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I would sort of echo what Jennifer said. It's wonderful to see the sort of engagement and enthusiasm. And I think it was really, important to put the issue of vision loss within the sort of broader context of healthcare, and just really trying to pinpoint how important vision is and how important it is for us to take care of our vision and then to support individuals who have vision loss. And I think during May, that's something we should all be thinking a little bit more about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Larissa and Jennifer. Very well said. And thank you to everyone who's joined the call today. And it's been a really robust discussion. I think there's some interesting things that we can all be following up on from the discussion, which is amazing. Thank you once again to Fighting Blindness Canada for joining us today, and also to the IFA team that helps put the Global Cafe on every single week. And I hope you all have a great weekend, a great long weekend here in Canada, and wishing you all the best, and we'll see you next Friday.